in order to survive in those modes, what we have realized and what helpfully we had were incredibly supportive funding partners. And at the beginning of a business, the CEO is involved in doing everything, right? I mean, everything. And so if you are spending 50% of your time raising money plus getting involved in everything else isn't done to its best ability.
Hello, my name is Alex Harrington-Griffin. I'm your host of the Real Developer podcast, powered by LandTech, the creators of Land Insight and Land Fund. In this episode 8, my co-host Johnny Britton, who's the CEO of LandTech, joined me for part 2 of this conversation with Joseph Rajah, the CEO of Joseph Homes, for a very important conversation around achieving B Corp status and building sustainably for SME developers. Together, we discuss everything from MMC to volumetric building, to really digging into the ROI that is possible and very evident through attempting the B Corp accreditation status. So on that note, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Real Developer podcast. My name is Alex Harrington-Griffin. In this 2-part episode, we have 2 amazing guests, 2 CEOs from the property development space and the prop tech space, Johnny Britton and Joseph Rajah. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
All good?
All good. Fantastic.
Well, I wasn't saying that for the camera. I am very much looking forward to this conversation because we've had some good meetings off camera beforehand and some good discussions. And we've got some questions lined up that I think, Joseph, you would be a perfect person to give us some perspective on. You've had an amazing journey with Joseph Homes, and we've spent some time in developer space beforehand and got to know some of the strategies that you've adopted to get to where you are now. Would you be able to give our audience a little bit of context, just to a little bit of what are you doing now? And then maybe we'll take a little bit of a look back as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So now we're a team of 20 people delivering on a pipeline of over 3,000 homes, 1,300 student beds, a few 100,000 square foot of industrial, following our mission, which is our Live Well manifesto, which is to deliver highly sustainable, low toxic developments across London, and now increasingly into the southeast. We are really keen to build a few platforms around alternative spaces and alternative uses. And we're doing that now through our regeneration of areas within London, which we're really, really excited about. And we're out currently for a forward funding fundraise for that portfolio.
Wow. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like the average sort of developer who started up yesterday. Do you want to give us a little bit of context in terms of how you got to this stage and maybe some of the early days of Joseph Homes? And I think really just what we're trying to unpack at this particular stage, it's autumn 2023 when we're recording, we know that there is some growth challenges for a lot of developers, and if not constraint challenges. So talking about the Joseph Homes journey and some of those that you may recognize for developers listening in today who may be sort of going through a few of those growth challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's, to be honest, over the last 15 years, it's not only been growth challenges, but just survival challenges, just staying alive.
I didn't want to say the word, but if you're going to call it.
Growth challenges are actually quite nice. It's the not regressing challenges is the problem. But no, I mean, so 15 years ago, I had come back from a stint working with NGOs in the developing world, in between 2 different careers. And that was really enlightening for me really gave me a perspective as to what a business's role is in society and how a business should be a force for good within the private sector, not only in the public sector. I was working with charities, as I said, but there were a lot of private businesses that I was involved with at the time, which being a force for good became absolutely naturally to them. I mean, it wasn't something there was no B Corp, there was no ESG, there was no acronyms to do this with. It was a genuine principle that they thought that business is a force for good and you can make a profit at the same time. Taking that and coming back to London, I wanted to do something which is really impactful to people's lives. And I thought people's homes was that, it's a really important thing for everybody. It's probably one of the most important things to them outside of their family. And I wanted to be the one to be able to provide that and provide it in a highly sustainable, low toxic way that really understands the narrative and the story around what it means to actually live in a home and how individual these things need to be eventually. So we started doing that and building single homes. It was just myself and a friend of mine at the time, buying at auction and refurbishing them, putting air filtration systems in them. You trying to use low toxic paints and glues. But there wasn't really much around at the time, so we had to really search for it, and it did put the costs up.
And that was there from the start.
Yeah,
you kicked off that manifesto right from the beginning.
Yeah. It wasn't called a manifesto. We were just buying at auction and doing our best, and there wasn't anything we actually put in writing in terms of a plan or a manifesto. But we just thought, right, what is the best thing that we can do? Well, what would we want for our kids? What would we want for ourselves? And we just did that. And we did it as best as we could whilst trying to maintain a profit, because it's more expensive to do it the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew from there. It grew to being multi dwellings, to then PD schemes, to Muse house schemes, to big new build schemes, to now regeneration schemes, and just always following the same ethos. But now it's a little bit more, well, hopefully a lot more professional, a lot more prescribed in terms of our standard documentation for our design teams and our sustainability teams.
Okay. Do you want to dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I always loved hearing these journeys, and the fact that you've done it with such an ethos is always very inspiring as well. I would almost like to not want to call it unique in terms of the fact that you've had these ethoses.
Yeah.
But often it does become like that, and it's more about deals rather than the way that you do things. But with all these experiences that you have, could you pick out some of the bigger learnings that you've had to overcome, or challenges you've had to overcome through the survival mode, maybe for a while, and then looking at some of the good learnings you've had as well through growth? Absolutely, yeah. There's definitely some things that I wish I knew earlier in the process, and when I look back and advising my 31-year-old self, I think at the time it was I wish that we had capitalized earlier. That was a big deal. The way that we funded things from the very beginning was to do it quite organically from one development to the next. Sort of do one development, gear up or sell, and take the equity and put it into the next one. And then as we grew into doing much more scalable projects, we sort of kept that same ethos of just sort of keep on taking equity from previous projects to put into the next project. What ended up happening with that was that we were funding things with both our own equity, but also other people's equity as well on individual projects, which meant that I was spending an inordinate amount of time raising money. Like as a CEO, just raising money was 50%, if not more, of my time doing that. What I've realized later on as we scaled and I needed to add more value in terms of strategic partnerships, in terms of design, in terms of innovation, was that there was better value. But I could have spent my time better in creating the value rather than raising the funding. And so either I needed to do one or two things, which was have a full-time person doing nothing but raising money, or I needed to capitalize the business way earlier with a singular investor or group of single investors, where there was one draw of capital, where when that was done, I could then focus on design and adding value and getting better density or better planning or better use classes or everything like that. And at the beginning of a business, the CEO is involved in doing everything, right? I mean, everything. And so if you are spending 50% of your time raising money plus getting involved in everything else isn't done to its best ability. And so that is the one thing I probably would have said to myself was like, in the first 5 years, after you've built a track record, which we did after obviously 5 years, was to go out and get a singular raw source of capital, which at the time was completely doable because it was an incredibly liquid market at the time and everybody wanted a piece, and we just kept saying no because we didn't want to be beholden to any one singular investor, and we wanted to, as much as we could, use our own equity. That's the first thing I would say that would have really helped. In terms of survival, we have been through it as you have as well with your business. I think we started a business around about so similar kind of times. We have navigated enormous storms over the past 15 years when it comes to referendums and Brexit and wars and pandemics and all kinds of things. And none of these things were expected. This is the point, right? And then these reasons why they are storms is because we just didn't realize that they were coming. And you can try to predict the future as much as you can in terms of the markets and prepare yourself for that. But nothing's going to prepare you for what happened at COVID. And when I woke up on the day after the vote on Brexit, I was in absolute shell shock. And then the inflation that came thereafter that, and compounded by the war in Ukraine, which has affected costs across the business, are things that you don't necessarily predict. So in order to survive in those modes, what we have realized and what helpfully we had were incredibly supportive funding partners. And that is what I believe is a word of advice to anybody that's either starting their business now or in the growth mode now, is spend an inordinate amount of time at the beginning ensuring you've got aligned, supportive funding partners, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to survive these kind of things.
Okay. I mean, just to dig in on that a little bit as well, in the prop tech sector, or technology in general, you find that incredibly supportive investors can sometimes turn out to be a bit fiendish when things are really, really going bad.
Yes.
You hear these stories all the time. Survival rates are not very high in technology businesses.
Yeah.
Is that a similar thing in property? And are they more comforted because you're doing things with the right culture in your business, the right ethos, that they want to back you rather than just kind of protecting their funds? They want to see you through because they know that you'll come out good at the end, and they're on a longer journey.
Yeah, I think it might be something a little bit to do with that, but I think it's mostly to do with building the relationship and getting the alignment to begin with at the outset, and then continuing with gardening that thing, throughout the whole process, and never taking any investor you've got, even the earliest ones, for granted. By understanding the value that they bring to the table, we are here because they were there, and having that gratitude towards them generally just builds a relationship. Like, these our funders today are our mates, and because we built that over 15 years, they're invested in us, we're invested in them, and we've got this mutual recognition that if we help each other, we're both going to do really well out of it, and that's it. In terms of them wanting to support us because we for the most part, we're trying to do the right thing. I think that probably on a subconscious level does resonate with them, because they're also trying to do the same thing as well. But I think it's more to do with just making sure your relationships are there. And to be honest, and it's bad to say, but because your contracts you leave in a drawer, but ensuring your contracts are right too, and making sure you've got good structures in place, making sure it's fair, and it's a win-win situation, which it should be.
Can I just dig into that point as well? Because obviously, you talked about the time you spent doing the individual raises, which is the experience of a lot of real developers and other SME developers out there in their growth story as well. Do you feel you had to spend that time to then better recognize what a good contract's going to look like with not a singular funding partner, but a long-term funding partner? And did it help you? Because you said you were being approached by people who said they want to do more deals with you, and you were saying, no, we've got to run equity, or we've got, happy with our setup. Did it help you to go through that experience or that process better? And do you feel that developers have to go through that? They couldn't just go straight from, getting a couple of successful projects and then jumping straight into a long-term funding partner. You surely got to go through the hard yards so you become a bit more tuned into that great partner that you've now got. That's a really
good point. Yes, I do think that we needed to go through a process, but I am a strong believer in learning from other people's mistakes. And so I think that if you have the ability to be able to have advisors around you or have a decent peer group who have already gone through that process, I don't think it's necessary to have the scars yourself. I think you can learn from. I mean, your lawyers are a good source of information regarding. Good source of invoices. But no, they are a good source of information regarding, because they see lots of different contracts all the time, lots of different developers. They see things go wrong, so they know how investors are acting in those situations. They can help you advise. So we've got some really good lawyers and really good advice along the way. I do think scars are important. I do think that personal experience, there's no substitute for that. But I think a lot of developers, because developers don't talk to each other enough. There isn't. This is my third industry I've been in now, and the other two industries I've been in, there's a lot of peer group camaraderie, a lot of peer group collaboration. There isn't this sort of that you're there, I'm over here, I'm in competition with everybody. Like at Joseph Holmes, we genuinely don't feel like we've got any competitors apart from ourselves, and we just want to concentrate on doing the next project better than the last project, and the rest will take care of itself. So as a result of that, we do speak to our peers. But when I speak to other developers, they don't really speak to anyone else. So they're learning everything for the first time continuously. And an incredibly inefficient way of doing business. And in tech, correct me if I'm wrong, but the learning is everything, right? Fail fast, fail mindfully, and learn for yourself, but also learn from your peers as well.
Yeah, it's like an ecosystem. Technology forms hubs.
Yeah.
Startups come, people move into them. There's some growth and experiences. Inevitably, or only a few survive, but the people who are working in them can see other opportunities, so they spin out their new ventures. Everything gets better through the flourishing ecosystem.
Yes,
the funding goes in, the events happen, the trade and of different skills and experiences can be done better. But you're absolutely right that it's completely different in property. There's not even many, if any, property development degree courses. You can't. There's not a track to get in there. There's no proper educational routes, so very few. So it's learning on the job, and there's a lot of money at stake if you do things badly.
Yes.
At LandTech, actually, we're trying to address some of those issues. We've got a community platform with about 2,000 members in now who are talking to each other all the time, because we saw being able to provide just a place where people can go to reach out to other industry leaders is beneficial to them. We don't sell it; it's just part of the package. But we're actually hoping that can lend a hand there.
That's great. I want to come. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'd never assume that I know it all. And I do think that if that kind of thing can be provided by somebody slightly departed from the real estate industry, but is involved with it in the way that you are, you get an objectivity about what it is that people need to learn first, second, and third. Because what happens with developers is you go in and you're doing everything in parallel. This is what the problem is. This is why lots of people fail. Is that if as a CEO of a business, well, here's the thing. If you start in a real estate business where you are an employee and you're working up the ranks, it is highly unlikely you're going to leave to do this yourself. It is too comfortable. It is too risky. There's too much capital at stake. You're generally not going to do it. So the people that do it are the people that haven't gone up the ranks and they've just started from scratch day one. Those people are learning everything all at once in parallel. When you're buying a place and then you're doing it up. There's hardly any other industry where that actually happens. As you said, there are real estate courses and degrees you can have at various different things, but nothing prepares you for the business side of real estate when you get into it, which it's just weird.
This probably provides us a nice little segue into the advisor piece, because we have some mutual friends that are advisors for both of for your company.
Yeah.
And I think what would be great is also to then see Joseph's approach and then look at it from a technology perspective. What is the role that advisors have played in your kind of growth story, and how have you picked the right people at the different stage? How did you know what you needed at certain points?
So there's two things. So there's my role. I wear two hats. There's my role as a founder, and there's my role as a CEO. And I think a lot of the mistakes that people make is assuming that founders are automatically CEOs. Just because you started the business, you know how to run it. And that was the mistake I made at the beginning. Well, I've been making for the last 2 careers before that as well. But I just keep making the same mistake because you fall into it because of your, I don't know if it's an ego or just, confidence. But you definitely think you can do things. You definitely think you can execute the ideas that you have, rather than just simply have the ideas and let somebody else execute them. And so my advisory roles that I have that advise the business are advising me in the transition from being a founder to a CEO. Though that's where I have found the most use are people who are CEOs or have been CEOs or have been chairmen of companies that have been working in partnership with CEOs that have done this exact thing before, working with founders and their transition to become CEOs. And that's been the most amount of help. In terms of other types of advisors, I think it's more. I get more benefit from peer groups than I do necessarily from oracles in the business, because I think real time learning, everything evolving so quickly in business and with various different market forces. Everyone's just looking at various different angles of how to navigate all of these obstacles, and so just having people who are actually on the front line in the trenches who are doing the do. And just sharing information, I think, is incredibly beneficial, rather than somebody that has done it previously and now is sitting on various different boards and isn't doing the do at the moment, but just seeing a lot of action one step removed is probably less useful for me personally when you're trying to navigate through what's coming next in the markets and how are people dealing with their legacy issues that they've had through COVID and through the war in Ukraine. That's for me. That's where I find the most use.
Interesting. Johnny, anything from a tech perspective that you think the advisors have played a fundamental role in? Don't have to name anyone specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the most value we've had is from advisors is when they've come in and kind of got us out of a bit of a pickle. Let's say that. Sometimes the dynamics of a team have broken up. When you've been in a journey like ours, we've been hiring 90 people remotely through COVID, and tackling big challenging problems that haven't been done before. That's why we have an opportunity, and so there's no playbook on how to do it. We're making it up. The analogy that people use is that you're on an aeroplane flying down in the sky, but you're touching the wings as you're falling, and hoping that at some point you can emerge. And it really does feel like that at times. And so advisors can be good, but they don't have an exact. They can't tell you what to do because it necessarily hasn't been done before. There are models and frameworks that can be applied, and they're often good, but sometimes just having an outside perspective to see what's going on, and so the personalities can be taken out of it, or you can
the
see
emotional connection as well.
The emotional connection, the politics of history, the ways of working, it all becomes very intense, and so that's where we found the most value of just having somebody help us take a step back, and almost just the time and space to work through an issue, guiding you and helping you rather than the kind of detailed advice.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree with that. And also to add to that as well, this is going to sound really weird coming out of my mouth, and the team are going to be laughing when they hear this, but I think governance really helps. Like the formality of it, formality of writing board reports to a board of directors and aren't being answerable to them is really helpful for somebody like myself who's never had a proper job and, never had an employer. And this board of directors is effectively my employer. I could probably fire them, but that's not the point. You respect the fact that they are the ones challenging you. And we have a great chairman at the moment, and some really, really great advisors. And one of the advisors actually we have is not in real estate at all, and that person gives really good perspective in terms of, and he's a systems guy, and just loves organizational structures and systems and that kind of thing. It really helps with just cutting through the chaff and understanding what the most efficient way of doing anything is. So I totally agree, allowing you to step back and just the process of writing a board report, I think is quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we'll touch on that in the second part as well, because I'm sure that's featured into the B Corp status that you've achieved. There is a lot of governance. I'm sure there's a bureaucracy involved in it as well. Yeah. Just whizzing through the questions in this space, and maybe we can open up again for both of you, especially for Johnny as well, given that we want to understand a little bit about the role of technology. We've talked about the role of advisors. This is a lot of information or guidance from humans coming into the business, but we know that there is a lot of data out there that can help us inform and make better decisions, whether it's long-term. Obviously, there's no crystal ball data, but if understanding where we are now, and obviously this is exactly where LandTech has built its home with Land Insight, with Land Fund, with the appraisal tool, with everything you've done, the community hub as well. Where do you feel, Joseph, from your perspective, first of all, where do you feel that technology is making the biggest impact in helping to make the decisions you're making today, whether it's on individual sites or a strategy level?
Okay, so technology is helping us in a variety of ways. But in terms of making decisions, it's about monitoring, it's about collecting data. So it's about, a big push for us is improving the air quality, as you know, in all of our developments. And so carefully monitoring that is really, really important, and what affects what affects that type of air quality. And you'd be surprised the kind of things that do. That's really important to us. Utilizing various technology within sustainable materials, I think that is quite important to us. And we are one of the founding members of Concrete Zero, which is a group of people who come together to try to figure out new technologies in concrete, so that it becomes eventually a carbon store. And I think we're going to see some really great advances there, and that's just really helping us. In terms of, real estate is still quite an archaic business. We still are building properties as we did hundreds of years ago. And so our exploration now is to really get a hold on MMC and try to understand what it is that we are going to be doing in that space. We've seen recently a lot of MMC contractors go bust, which is something that I think a lot of people did predict. But now we're seeing sort of a phoenix rise out of this industry, and we're seeing the ones that are remaining are doing it pretty well. And finally, volumetric production, I think, over the next few years is going to come into its own, especially for the kind of product that we are delivering in the alternative space, where we're delivering beds, co-living beds, PBSA beds. It lends itself really well to this kind of technology. And we think we'll start seeing the actual savings that everybody was professing that existed in terms of cost and program over the next few years. And that's so a lot of focus we're having now is on, for the next line of production, is on bringing in MMC into what we do. Good.
Well, I think it will definitely support a lot of your sustainability goals, which we're also going to get to talk to in the second part. Johnny, from your perspective, we've on this podcast, we've talked a lot about the data inputs to Land Insight, all the various realms you've got, the tie-up now with HomeTrack. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a teaser, but from your perspective, where do you see the next iteration of technology, whether it's something that LandTech are producing or something that you think the industry needs? Joseph has highlighted something that we all are painfully aware of the archaic nature of the industry. But what do you think, whether LandTech are solving or not, what do you think the industry needs? And is there anything that you're working on at the moment that might help us with some of those?
Please tell me it's planning.
Possibly. I'll move on to that. I mean, the AI is the mega trend, undoubtedly. That'll start to influence our lives at an increasing rate and in ways that we haven't even yet imagined. The people who are the companies that control interesting or unique data that can be used to be interpreted or to provide additional value, they stand a really good chance of being able to flourish in this AI new wave of data that's coming in. So I see real opportunities for in planning, actually, as well as in land and planning. There's opportunities all across real estate to make a deeper connection with, for developers to make a deeper connection with the communities that they work in. I think that there's tons of data out there being gathered about how places are, about how places were, about where places are going through local plans and trends in housing demand and supply in the market. And companies, tech companies, are coming together now to overlay all this together to give both developers insight into what communities want, and communities also to have more visibility on what's going on, and therefore to have an input into those communities. And that kind of forms a virtuous circle with regards to developers being able to know what communities want, because the community's got better visibility over what's going on, and then they can build more in line with what that community needs, whether it's through the build projects on site or the community infrastructure section 106 agreements and knowing how to place them, or how people feel. Are they feeling isolated or in lonely in an area? Do they feel unsafe? I think that all of how the different segments of a community, rather than just kind of the vocal majorities, are going to start to be able to be raised up to the fore, and communities built better around their constituents. That's the kind of vision of how I could see it playing out.
What kind of form does that take? What medium is that? Where's the data feeding into, and where's the outputs coming out of? Is it Land Insight, or is it?
I would like to think that LandTech has a big role to play in all of this. Certainly, okay. Yeah, but I view it as more of an ecosystem of providers. Yes. There's lots of people doing different parts of that. We don't want to control everything. We can't. It's just far too big and too much. But it's when you combine the data sets together to draw out the insights is where the role of AI can really come and help to interpret this fragmented data into narratives.
Where are those data sets coming from? Is it social media, or is it just actual data retrieval manually? Or where do you get the data from?
Well, I think that people will have more tools or like apps on their phones that they can contribute to. So, some of the work that we're doing is, we're gathering fragmented data, we're packaging it up, and we're making it available.
Yeah.
I think that there are use cases for that that can help homeowners, home buyers, and for them to see what's going on around them, and for us to give that data to other people in the market who can exploit it in many different ways. And then they contribute back to it by knowing what goes on. You collect a lot of data. You can then start to see what that data is useful for in that scenario, whether it's knowing what planning is happening in an area, and therefore being able to have a say and give the kind of silent majority a say. So if they actually do have a better interface onto the planning system, they can they'll be able to contribute back to it more. So it's a combination of the councils being able to be digitally savvy in that regard, homeowners or home buyers or community constituents having the tools to access what's happening in the planning system and feeding back, as well as developers having greater access to all of this information, because so they know what communities need. So
I think it's brilliant. I find this really fascinating. I'm actually at an event this evening about private-public sector partnerships and the role of regeneration in partly trying to help solve this housing crisis. And one of the things that we want to talk about is collaboration versus consultation. At the moment we consult with the local communities about what we think we need, and you try and get some feedback from that. But really, what we truly want to do is collaboratively work to build a scheme with the local community. And we are utilizing various different technologies to help do that. But that basically just means a website and leaflets and that kind of thing. But if there was a way to be able to get some real-time data as to what the actual demand was. When we go into one of the documents you need to submit for a planning application is a demand study for the various different use classes that you've got. That demand study is based on information that's old. That's the thing. And that demand study is trying to align itself with a local plan. And that local plan is even older. And so in terms of trying to understand what the local community needs, it's sometimes very different to what a local community wants. And getting that actual data, if there's a way of you doing that through some type of technology, AI or the like, that's game changing, because then you are actually building something that's actually relevant. Not to mention the lag of actually building it, which takes years. And by the time you've built it, is it even useful then? So having something that's flexible and adaptable at the time in terms of real estate infrastructure is also something that needs to be addressed using technology.
Well, I want to move us on to part two of this session as well, which is getting into a little bit more of the pieces you've hinted on from the B Corp journey of the sustainability of developers in terms of the way they build, the way they set themselves up. We talked a bit about how those businesses can set themselves up. Just to put a sort of line in the sand of this part, is there, Joseph, something that you think you can put into a 60-second sort of piece as a reminder to the SMEs out there listening in terms of their growth story? We talked a lot about the finance partners. Is there anything else you want to add to that you can kind of summarize for us as a parting bit of advice?
Yeah, and this is going out for the real estate sector in particular. Yeah,
yes.
Okay. So there's not just business generally. I would say advice is really weird because advice is generalistic and everybody's individual, personalities are individual. One piece of advice I might give to somebody, which I gave to myself, was focus on one thing and you'll succeed better. Some people don't work that way. They like to focus on lots of different things and they'll succeed better. So I think general advice is dangerous. But one thing I can say in the real estate space is that real estate is slow. And so if you are a budding entrepreneur that likes to move quickly in tech and something else, then do that. Because real estate is a slow business and you need to build a business plan for the long term. And so what my vote in 60 seconds you said, so the advice would be focus on what you can achieve in 10 years rather than what you want to achieve in 2 years and capitalize the business for that. And you'll just make better decisions in real estate. And if you want to do something quicker, go into a different business.
That's a soundbite that we can definitely use, Joseph. I appreciate that, and thanks for thinking it through. Hello everyone, it's your host Alex Harrington Griffin again, just to say thank you for joining us for this episode. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe, and of course, share it with your peers. A big thank you to our partners LandTech for powering this episode. If you want to find out more about their products like Land Insight or Land Fund, go to land.tech or follow LandTech on LinkedIn for SME developer updates, finance updates, and of course the data and research mentioned in this episode. We'll see you back for the next session when we get into some real development conversation. Thank you.